So with that being said, let's head to the toilet.
I made 108 million poops this last year, and by the end of today's video, you're going to be able to just copy me.
I'm going to break down the process of how I edited this video in After Effects. And since then, I've pooped 108 million times and gained 0 followers and built this multi-billion-dollar business empire with this very simple process. Everyone you watch online uses After Effects and Premiere Pro, and I'm going to teach you how to do the same effect. So let's jump right in.
So, welcome guys to this tutorial. So that was my attempt at impersonating Iman Gadzhi. So I don't run a multi-million-dollar business, but I do know some After Effects. So let's jump right in. First and foremost, let's do a quick breakdown of this video that he has just created over here. So the video is him with a talking head shot in front of a plane, private jet background. The numbers are running with a bit of text animation coming up at the bottom of the video. You see a close-up of him and his UI of his YouTube channel, and if you look really closely, you can actually see like there's a bit of like tiny details of like LED panels that shows the RGB split pixels on the computer screen. And the numbers of the subscribers is actually growing from 0 to like, I don't know, like 120k. So we're going to replicate that at the same time. And we're going to go into this screen here with the UI design of YouTube, with the money being printed from 0 to a million and the US dollar just animating coming into like that. So we're going to replicate this same style of animation that he's very popular and known for. So let's jump right in, okay? So this is what I've created. Kind of like the similar effect that we're trying to achieve with Iman in his videos. So with this same effect, you can actually look through some of his other videos in this the other sections. He has a similar section where it shows the social media accounts for TikTok and Instagram. Using this technique, we can, just replicate and just duplicate and try achieve a similar look and feel. Okay, so let's jump right in. So first and foremost, let's drag and drop a new background solid layer over here. The reason why I like to drag and drop my pre-existing solid is because whenever I create a new solid over here, if you can see, I just put this as test, it actually shows a duplicate. And I don't like when I have too many solids in my project panel over here. I just like to keep things organized. So I usually have like a templated solid already presets in like different sizes over here, and I can just drag and drop. But then again, this is just me. So this composition over here is set at 1080p. So if you want to do it in 4K, it's up to you. I'm just doing it in 1080p. So I'm just gonna drag this texture over here. If you want this resource, it will be down below in the description. And then I'm gonna add a piece solid, and I'm gonna add a Gaussian blur. Okay, so now if I just solo this over here, you need to remember to have this unchecked, because if you can see closely in this solid, it blurs out the edges, but like it doesn't extend the pixels. So you need to uncheck this to make sure that it extends beyond the pixels. So that's just like really blur. And this kind of just ends up becoming like the radiant backdrop right here. Now for the texture, let me just try a couple of variations. So if you hit shift plus or minus or like equal on the keyboard, it shifts the different layers of the blending mode. So I'm holding down shift plus or minus on the keyboard. So I'm just shifting around the textures just to see what kind I like. Maybe I'll just stick to multiply for now, and let's just like reduce it to like maybe 20% for now, okay? So once you're done with the texture, let's do the iPad. So for the iPad scene, I'm going to have this over here. So now for the iPad, I actually already made this myself. I basically created a few shape layers to kind of just create a look and feel of an iPad. But if we were to do this from scratch, I can show you how simple it is to recreate this. So here's a hot tip from me. So an iPad, if you look up online, has a screen resolution of 2388 by 1668 pixels. So what I like to do is actually recreate the same exact pixels resolution that an iPad has, and then using this technique, what you do is actually click onto the shape layer over here, and let's say I'm creating a rounded rectangle tool, double click it, and what that does is it creates a piece of solid on the composition itself with the same exact pixel resolution as an iPad. And then what I like to do is actually adjust the corners at the edges to something that I like. So let's say I like it like that. Like that looks like an iPad. And since I've already added a bit of a gradient over here, I'm just gonna do some adjustment on the gradient itself so that it's more grayish. And let's say we pick this color not to be full black, but just a tinge of gray. So that is looking like an iPad right now, but you want it to be a bit more realistic. So there's two techniques over here that I like to do. So I like to kind of just like put a bit of the bevel edges right here. So what that does, if you look really closely, you can actually see the corners of the iPad. It has like a bit of rounded edges, and it's not too sharp and fake, so it looks a little bit more realistic on the corners right now. And what I then like to do is, okay, so for Iman Gadzhi, he has a bit of like a colorful stroke along the edges. So I'm gonna do the same thing right now, and I'm gonna add a stroke color of yellow, and let's say we put it at 5 pixels. So right now it looks like that. So because the pixels is 5 and it's extending beyond the composition size, what I then like to do is just like resize this to like, let's say, 2400 pixels, just a little bit, so you can actually see a little bit more of the edges of the yellow. And it's kind of straightforward, and I like to add a little bit of glow over here, so just like it adds a little bit of subtlety to the yellows. There's a bit of a glow. Yep, bit of glow. And then I would like to add circle UI icon, and we're gonna use a solid color, the Mac OS icon, like this, pastel, no stroke. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna hold down shift and just drag this, basically recreate the shape of the icon over here. Okay, so what I just did is I'm using a tool over here called Motion Tool. So what this tool does is it actually helps move the anchor point. So if I click this, it moves the anchor point to the top. If I click this, it automatically moves the anchor point to the middle. So if you actually want to do that manually yourself, and if you don't have this script installed, you can actually hold down Y on the keyboard and move your anchor point accordingly right now. So I just have this here because it's easy and it's way faster for me to do my work. If you want to go check it out, you can always buy it online. But yeah, let's jump right back into it. So we have the green, and next we duplicate this. We are creating the yellow, and last but not least, we are creating green. All right, so oops, that, yeah. But anyway, so okay, what I just did was I just did Command A and I just hit SS. It's like a habit of mine to just like keep clicking buttons sometimes. But anyway, I wasn't intentionally trying to type S. But anyway, so we have our iPad scene right here, and we want to go back into our tutorial. So if I just drag and drop the iPad on top, and just making this looks kind of like that. Let's just put it in the center for now. And it looks kind of perfect, more than if you ask me. So I'm just gonna double click this, increase the size of this a little bit, just kind of just add that look and feel that I want. Okay, ignore the ass. So okay, next what we're gonna do is we're gonna do the YouTube UI platform. So I already did that for myself, but I have this right here, which is a clean template over here. So how I did this is actually very simple. I basically just went online to YouTube, and then I just kind of just like took a screenshot of the UI platform itself, and I went to Photoshop and I kind of just cleaned it up. So if I were to just show you the files that I have right now, it's kind of straightforward. But yeah, I just basically took a screenshot, put it in Photoshop, did some cleanup, kind of straightforward. I think you can always do the same on your site. So this is what it looks like. You know, I just cleaned it up, remove some of the panels of the UI, and just separated the objects that I want to animate. So like in this case, I wanted to animate the first 4 videos of my profile, and I wanted to make sure that the subscriber button is being separated from the ad. As for the name and the subscriber count, I want to add that in later in post-production. So I purposely left that empty so that I can always do that in After Effects. So if we jump right back into it, I've already retyped this and recreated this itself. So let's start with some animation, shall we? So I'm gonna animate the video coming in first. So for this, it's pretty straightforward. I am going to click this. So what I like to do is I like to kind of just animate things all at the same time and then just sequence it, because it's way much more faster to think ahead about like how I want to do things instead of manually animating them all at the same time. It just makes this process of editing and animation way faster. So I'm just gonna do this, and then I'm just gonna show you what I mean. So we are animating this for about, let's say, 15 keyframes. I'm gonna hit function F9 for the easy ease, and I'm gonna turn on the speed graph button over here, and I'm going to just move and shift speed graph. So currently, if I were to play that back, it'll look like that, which is a little bit fast. So I just want to like drag this out. It's about 20 frames. Okay, perfect. So now what we like to do is add a caution blur to all of them. So I remember, you know, it was kind of like out of focus and blur, and then like as it comes in, it's in focus. So let's do a quick one of that right now. So I'm just gonna hit U on the keyboard and hit keyframe of blur. So from, let's say, 20, it goes into focus to 0, and I'm just gonna hit function F9. If I just solo this, maybe I want this to get focus right as it touches, and then over here, let's say I do an opacity fade so it doesn't just appear out of nowhere. That's looking slightly better, but if you notice, the edges of it is coming onto the screen. So what we need to do is toggle the repeat edge pixels off, and then you can see it's being blurred on the edges side of the pixels. Much better. So if we were to copy this keyframe and add that to the same position on our video 2 and 3 deal. Oops, sorry, I accidentally copied the position as well. So my bad. We just need the caution blur and opacity. So oops, I forgot to easy is this. I'm just gonna select opacity and copy and hit on video 2, 3, and 4. So now if we look at the video, now it's getting somewhere. So what we want to do is kind of just offset this animation. So you can do it manually like this, you know, just let me just offset this by like 5. And if you want it to snap, just hold down shift. It's looking slightly better, but I think we need to adjust the speed because it's looking a little bit robotic in my opinion. That's just me. So just gonna pull this a little bit. Now it looks smoother. Perfect. So holding down tab on the keyboard, we can go back to the previous pre-composition and it looks like this. Now we're doing it right now. Okay, so next thing first is we're gonna do the same thing and we're gonna apply to the subscribe button. So for the subscribe button over here, I'm gonna do the same thing. Hold down, hitting P on the keyboard. I'm gonna animate for about 15 frames. Just bring it down some more. Doing the same technique, I'm gonna apply caution blur, 20 pixels. I'm gonna hit keyframe and U on the keyboard. Doing the same technique, I'm gonna go make this into focus. Just that for this time round, I kind of just want it to appear. Maybe this is too much. Malfunction F9. Get keyframes out a little bit. Perfect. So I think I want to kind of just add the same technique that we did, which is the fade. So what we did was we kind of just faded in the front a little bit as it comes in, and it reaches like 10 frames. Let's try this out, shall we? Perfect. And it's kind of like slow and soft as well. So next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna do some text animation. So for the text animation over here, I'm gonna just do a typewriter effect that's pretty straightforward and simple, like the typewriter. So you can just drag and drop, or you can double click on to the timeline. I just double click it, and I'm gonna do the same thing for Zach Ross and subscribers. I hit U on the keyboard. This is a bit too slow. Let's just drag it out to about 1 second. So now we have that typewriting effect. Now we just want to offset this animation a little bit. So let's say this comes in at about first frame, and then this comes at about 10 frames, just a little bit here. And then what we want to do is for the YouTube, let's drag this out. Let's make this all come in at about approximately 2 seconds, shall we? So it comes off a bit later. Perfect. That's exactly what we want. Now, let's do the difficult part. Okay, so this is the difficult part in my opinion. So the numbers that are being generated that we're trying to recreate right now is the effect where it moves from 0 to 120. Okay, so let me just show you guys what I mean. Okay, for this section of the video, we're gonna do a running number sequence of the numbers of the subscribers from 0 to 120k. For this particular effect that we want, we require to recreate it by doing technique using expressions. So in order to do that, let me just show you what I mean. There is one method that we tend to do, which is we add this thing called slider controller. So if I just drag that in and drag drop, what slider controller does is it lets you pick and choose this source text. And let's say if I click this and I were to just select the slider on top, I can then say I want you to animate this and keyframe this from 0 to, let's say, 120. Okay, let me just solo that to show you what I do. Now what that does is that it creates a running number, but it's, you see, the number becomes jumbled up. Like the number adds like decimal points, and that's kind of like not what we want. So I'm gonna put something into the description right now if you just copy and paste what I mean. So if I were to just copy this from my original, just to show you what I mean, I've already recreated this in my other video. So I'm just gonna copy that in over here and paste this over here. Okay, so if I were to just explain this about what I just did, and if you just copy the thing into the description below, what it does, it adds a math.round, and it actually rounds off the number and doesn't use decimal points. If you want to use decimal points, that's going to be in another video. But if I were to just explain it into its simplest terms, it rounds off the number for you here at the front. And previously, it was just the effect that was attached to the slider. And right now, we add a math.round at the front, and we close it with this parentheses. And what we add at the back is a plus with an inverted columns K with an inverted columns close. Now what that does is it adds the value of K at the end of the sequence over here. So whenever your number goes from 0 to 120k, it stays and it follows the number sequence right here, which is exactly what we want. Yeah, if you want this, just go down and just copy it below. Okay, so I'm just gonna like sequence this up, shall we? We just sequence this first before the subscribers, and if we were to play this section, it looks like this. Perfect. So now that we've already animated the 0 to 120k subscribers, we want to bring that out into the iPad. But first, I forgot to mention, I actually added a piece of solid on the background. So initially it was supposed to look like this. So I cleaned this image up in Photoshop, right? And I added it in. I don't like the edges because when I clean this image out, as you can see at the bottom over here, there was a bit of like cutout over here. So in order to clean this image, I essentially added a rounded piece of rectangle as a solid background. But what that does, it creates something like that. But as you can see here, it reveals the edges over here. Now in order to hide this, one technique I like to do is I like to just pick the trackpad option and select the shape. What that does is that it creates a mat that cuts off the edges, but now you don't see the shape. And from that point onwards, I usually just like to switch it on. So it hides the edges of the subscribers while keeping the rounded edges corners, which is what we want. Now, if we go back to the tutorial, and this is our iPad, and let's just bring this in. I'm gonna make this a little bit more bigger. Shift this down. Let's make this about 65. Bring this up a little bit. Okay. Now I'm gonna add the tutorial, the UI. I'm just gonna get this a little bit smaller. Shift this down. Maybe make this about 3, and then let's just look at what it looks like animation wise. I think that looks good. Okay, so I'm just gonna parent this to the iPad, so whenever I move the iPad, it moves along with me. Perfect. So now for the next thing that we need to do is actually add the US dollar. So I'm just gonna do that right now. So I have a US $100 bill right here. Let's change the color a little bit. I think it's a little bit too blue, so I'm adding a curves and reduce it with the blue so it looks a tinge a bit of green. Let me make this yellow so it's a bit more easier to understand, and rotate this at about 90 degrees and move it over here. So before I go explaining this, I would like to make you guys understand a little bit of After Effects. So After Effects animates object based on the anchor point. So in this case, the anchor point is in the middle. So if you look back at the animation of the video of Iman's video over here, you can actually see that the numbers is being generated as the banknote is flipping and rotating like as though you're opening a bunch of money in the palm of your hand. So in order to do that, you actually have to rotate this and move this kind of like this, you know, angle wise, and as though it's coming out this way. But if you were to break that down, and let's say you want to do that based on one piece of note, it's going to be really troublesome for you to animate in rotation like this. And then let's say I do a keyframe of this and a keyframe of this, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, it looks rotated, but it's going to be messy and wonky in terms of animation if you're going to move your like a couple of positions around, right? So we don't want to do that right now. Let me just show you what I mean. Like, that looks wonky, like it looks ugly. So right now we don't want to do that. We actually want to think of this as a null object. So what I like to do in this case, I would like to add a null object based off this node. So if I were to copy this position of the node and paste on the null object, now the null object is sitting in the middle of the banknote. We don't want that. We actually want this null to be based PD. So think of it as the null acts as a piece of anchor where all the banknotes are being animated from. So in this case, you can then say this node is attached to this null object, and then I were to label this as yellow, and I were to duplicate this, move this below. This, I can then say this is like -20, and this is exactly what we want. Do the same, -40, do the same, -60, and do the same, -80. So that is looking perfect. I think we just need one more at the top, which instead of being negative, it's +20. So it looks like this. So, and if let's say I were to kind of just think of the null object as a piece of like anchor where it rotates, right? I would select all the null objects, hit R on the keyboard, hit keyframe, and then here I, let's say, would rotate it like this all the way down to -20. So now if I were to select all this keyframe, hit function F9, go back to our speed graphs, I push the keyframe of the curves editor like this. I mean, now if we were to look at just this animation right now, that is looking perfect right now, in much better, right? Now, select everything and hit double S. This is what I like to do, just to kind of collapse everything. So it looks like this right now. Perfect. Now, what we want is we don't want to show the null object onto the screen. So what you can do is select everything and kind of like toggle this on, and that kind of just hides the null object. So you don't see the null object right now as it animates like that. So this is looking perfect. Now we just want to kind of just offset this animation. So think of it like the same thing in terms of sequence. So let's just offset this by 1 frame of each, 1 frame like that. And if I were to play this, oops, it's okay in my opinion, but I think because we offset it with the null object, it ends up becoming 2 frames, if you know what I mean. So let's just redo that right now, and let's just move all the note above so you understand what I mean. Just double checking the rotation. Yep, okay. Basically, we need to sequence the note itself by 1 frame. So in order to do that, we can do that manually right now like this, or you can use this script that says sequence layers. So what I like to just do is select everything and say I want it to offset by 1 frame, and what that does is it offsets it for you, which is perfect. So now you can always change this by, you know, if you want this to be offsetted by like maybe 2 frames, 3 frames, 5 frames, up to you. But like just for this particular video, it's just 1 frame. Okay, next, we want to control a master down. So I'm just gonna duplicate this right now. Okay, I'm gonna bring this up, just making sure nothing is being attached to the null object number 1. I'm gonna go and hit reset the rotation back to 0. I'm gonna call this main null. So I'm just gonna wait until it shifts at the end of the animation. Yep, it ends around here. Okay, let's say this is the null object, so I let you know what I mean again. So I'm just gonna select every single one of the null object, and I'm gonna parent to the main null. So with this main null controller, I can then just move it around very easily right now. So for all intents and purposes, let me just bring this down a little bit so you see more of it coming in like that, which is exactly what we want. Perfect. Now let me just bring this a little bit down more, maybe like this. Okay, so perfect. So now at this part of the tutorial, it's looking like as though it's coming along all together right now. Now we need to kind of just make this a little bit better. So if you remember in the tutorial, if you remember and you look back into the video of Iman Gadzhi right now, as we discussed earlier, there's a little bit of like LED panel on the video itself. So we're gonna just recreate that look and feel right now by doing a RGB split. I'll show you what I mean. So I have this pre-composed here, which is what I've already done. I've added a RGB split and some color correction right now. So we're gonna do that right now and do an RGB split for the tutorial. So let me just recreate everything again from scratch. So what I did was I added a piece of solid, and then I added a piece of Venetian blinds. I'm just gonna name this red and make this lighty. I'm gonna add a fill because we need some color. Bring this down. Okay, so think of this as like a Venetian blind is a piece of pixel. So the pixel is right now set at 20 because it's very thick. But what we want is we want this to be as little as possible for the naked eye. So I reduced it down to 3, and as you can see closely, it creates this like red LED panel strip that we want. Now we're gonna do the same thing, and we're gonna call this blue, and I'm just gonna change the color here to the color blue. I'm going to move this by 1 pixel, just a tiny bit, so you can see really closely. It's offsetted by 1 pixel. I'm gonna do the same thing, and I'm gonna call it green, and I'm gonna change this to green, and doing the same thing, offset it by 1 pixel. So right now it looks very much like a piece of LED pen and strip. Now we just need to add a grid effect in this layer. Okay, so after this is being done, we need to add a piece of adjustment layer. So I'm just gonna grab a adjustment layer, and I'm gonna click grid, and I'm gonna add black color. So I just reduce this down to about 1, and let me just increase the feather to 1.5, so it's not too sharp. Now I'm gonna play around with the corners and just adjust this to what I like. You're gonna make this as close as possible to the anchor so it looks like an LED panel. Perfect. Now it looks like as it's an LED panel. So what I just did is basically based on the anchor point, I reduced the corners of it as close as it is. So basically what I just did is I played around with the anchor point, and I moved the corners to be as close as it can to the anchor point. So if you can see here, anchor point is about 960, and it's about 962 at the corner. So what that does is that it squeezes it to about 2 pixels, both vertically and horizontally, creating this LED effect that we have right now. So based on this RGB split, we want to add that back into the main layer over here. And right now, what we want is we want to kind of just play around with the blending mode. So for this case, let's add a bit of an overlay, and right now it's looking really nice, but it's a bit too much, as you can see. So I'm just going to reduce this down a little bit to about maybe 24%. So that looks really nice. I'm going to duplicate it again, and I'm going to change this to classic color dodge. And for this one, I'm going to make this maybe a little bit like maybe 20%. Now that is looking perfect right now. Okay, so if you look closely right now on the screen, like what that subtle effect does is that it adds a little bit of vertical and horizontal LED pixel lines onto the screen. And as you can see, it affects the whole entire texture of the LCD screen, which is what we want. Okay, this is exactly what we want. Now, what I think I would like to do is I'm gonna add a bit of color correction. So let me just put some curves to adjustment here, and let me just put this as CC. Right now, let's decrease the blue a little bit. Okay, I think just moving the blue is good enough. Yeah, just like basically I just push the blue a little bit down. I want it to be a bit more like yellow looking. Next, I'm gonna add and duplicate this, and I'm gonna, let's say, a chromatic aberration right here. So for chromatic aberration, you can find some plugin if you want, but After Effects has its own chromatic aberration here. If I just double click it right now, so what that does is it offsets the blue, green, and red pixels, and right now it's a little bit too much. And if I were to just reduce this down to 1.5, say green, I move it down to -1, then blue, I give it down to 0.5, maybe bring this back down to 1, maybe the green put back to 0. Yeah, kind of like that. So if you look closely, it adds a little bit of like chromatic aberration, which is what you want on like the screen. So yeah, which is kind of like looking what we want. So now with this effect, if you can notice at the bottom left here, it ruins this section here. So in order to fix that, you just adjust the field of view and reduce it down. So if I just reduce it down a little bit, yep, that looks much better. Now if we just play this back for about 4 seconds, it's 90% there. Perfect. Now we're gonna add a bit of like feathering. I basically just add a piece of solid, and I'm gonna just do a bit of feathering, and I'm gonna subtract this and reduce this down to maybe 250. I just bring this mask up a bit. So perfect. Now the bottom part doesn't look so sharp. It's more faded at the bottom and feathered. Now it's almost there. All right, it's almost there. So now what we want to do for the last thing is to add some text animation. That's going to type here total predicted. Make this white. Reduce this down. Let's say I put this bottom here. I'm going to put this black feather. I'm going to make this swoosh there so I understand that this is a text. Go 45. Yep, I think that looks nice. And the last thing we need is we'd like to do the money. Okay, so now for the money, we want the numbers to generate from 0 to 1 million. And this time around, we want to add a bit of expression where there is commas in the money and there's a dollar sign. So based on what we did previously, the same technique applies where the semicolon adds a bit of a letter K. We want the same thing with the dollar sign here. If you want this expression, you can just check it out below. So basically, using the same technique, we're gonna add a slider control into this text object, open the source text, hold alternate and click, and I'm going to paste the expression. So what this expression does, if I were to explain it to you guys, is if you can see here, it adds a numerical number of a dollar sign at the front of this effect right here, which we just did. And then we added, if you remember just now, we added a fixed to value of a decimal point of 0. So if I were to kind of just put this at 2, and if I were to just close this up right now, you can see it becomes 2 decimal points. So we don't want that. We just undo that. And what this expression does at the bottom is it adds a bit of a function where the function of this is to add commas of the number. So I saw this online on a tutorial somewhere on YouTube. Thank you for the guy for doing this, but basically this adds a little bit of a comma on your dollar sign. So if I were to just do a quick animation right now and show you what I mean, let's say we add 1 million. Okay, perfect. So now if you play that back, it animates exactly what we want, from 0 to 1 million. Perfect. Just shift this and I'll show. Maybe this can come in a little bit later on, about 2 seconds, or the 1 second. Perfect. So this is exactly what we want in this tutorial. Now, last but not least, we need to add a bit of a camera effect. So in order to do that, you go on the layer and click new camera. I'm going to create a 1 node camera, as you can see here. I'm going to turn on depth of field and maybe set the aperture at 2.5. Let me just take a picture of this just to see and reference how it looks like in 2D before I shift things around in 3D. So I'm just going to select everything below except for the textures. Okay, right now everything is in 3D. So what I want is, if you remember previously, this is the main null object. So in terms of camera, we want a bit of parallax effect as the camera is zooming in. So we want this to be really up close in your face as the camera zooms in. So I'm gonna just make this at about 1000. I'm just gonna shift this around. So remember how just now we took a screenshot? We can always refer back by clicking this to see what you take. So this is a quick tip right here. So sometimes when I move stuff, I want things to kind of have a reference point on how it looks like. So previously it looks like that. So right now, as you can tell, this is really big. I want to just decrease this down, maybe 60. I'm gonna shift this back up, maybe shift this around here. Still looking a little bit big, maybe like this, 48. Yep, that's kind of close enough. Yep, let me just push this up a bit. Okay, yep, that's kind of close enough to how we previously did that. So because right now this is a position of -1000. Now if you hold P on the camera and do a bit of keyframe and say I want this to animate zooming out, you can actually do that. Actually, let's do zooming in. Yeah, let's just zoom out. Let's zoom out. Yeah, let's zoom out like here. Okay, now it's looking perfect. You can see there's a bit of like parallax effect with the money right now, which is exactly what we want. Now we just need to fix the background. Let me just drag this keyframe out a little bit. Okay, so now the money, I don't want it to reveal the edges of it, so it looks like that. Now we need to fix the background, which is this. I'm just gonna make this a little bit more bigger. The shape layer looks fine. We're gonna increase the size of polka dots. Now it looks a little bit better, which is exactly what we want. Like, I'll just make this a little bit longer. Oops. So I'm just basically holding down the button N to move my timeline, see how much it shifts. So basically this is the timeline that you can preview. I'm just shifting this around. I'm gonna move the camera keyframes a little bit just to see. Now it's looking perfect. All right, so this is looking perfect right now and it's almost there. I just want to add one tiny bit. So this is usually what makes a difference in terms of motion graphics. So sometimes adding a little bit of that extra 10 to 5% adds a little bit of difference in the video. And what I mean by that is that I'm going to add a bit of texture here. So I found this texture online, which is this animated, TV screen effect. So what this does is that this adds a little bit of randomness into the texture. So because we already have the LCD panel texture that's been attached to the whole entire thing, it's looking a little bit unorganic, in my opinion. So you want to add a little bit of movement right here, but you don't want to add too much. I'm just going to change this down to classic color dodge. And then I'm going to reduce this down to probably about 15%. I don't know if you can notice this, but if you look really, really closely as I play this video, right now there's a little bit of movement on the LCD screen. It looks as though the screen is moving. Because if you think about it, any old monitor, the light is always shining at the back. And I'm just gonna explain this why I add this in, because it adds a little bit of subtlety into your animation. That subtle movement of that LCD screen adds a little bit of depth into it. And sometimes it's these little things that makes a difference in terms of your motion graphics. So now I think it looks absolutely perfect. If we go to zoom out back at 100%, this is exactly what we want. Okay, just a bit of tip. Where did I get this texture online? It's pretty simple. I just went online to Pixabay. I just do a quick search with LCD and this LCD noise glitch just came out. Just downloaded it. It's free to use. It's non-copyright free for you to use, no copyright issues, and that's how I got the texture online. As you can see, that subtlety of that LCD footage that's flickering adds a little bit of subtle animation to the panels. So it adds a little bit more depth into your video. Oops, I forgot one thing, which is right now the focus distancing looks okay, but the blur on the banknote, I just want it to be a little bit more blur. I can technically increase the blur amount on the camera, but sometimes when you do that, it really increases the render time. So for this case, I'm just doing a quick fix on the banknote and I'm adding a little bit of blur. Alright, now that looks much more better. It's more out of focus. Let's play that back. Okay, that looks amazing. So with this technique right now, you can actually recreate this onto the other segments. So if I just kind of go through the things that I've already made, I've done the same effect, the same thing that we've learned just now using the techniques that I just taught you. It's applied to here, but right now instead of a YouTube channel homepage, it's on a piece of phone that shows your TikTok followers and your Instagram followers. Same concept, it's been applied. This is the same exact animation, just at a different camera angle. And yeah, so you can use the same technique against any other concepts that you guys want to do. It's pretty straightforward, and that's about it. Thank you guys for watching so much. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please let me know down below in the comments if you enjoyed this tutorial. If you guys want to see some more content in terms of After Effects, Premiere Pro, how to be an editor, how to be a motion designer, let me know in the comments below. Stay tuned some more. There's going to be much more content down the road planned for the year. And until then, keep making awesome shit. Bye guys.